Nintendo is going through a transformation. And it's been clear ever since the beginning of the year, because I'm sure most of us Nintendo fans has probably noticed the pattern by now. Typically when the calendar year starts, we can expect a new Nintendo Direct. And typically this Nintendo Direct happens around the month of February. But this year, things were a little different. Because instead of having a general Nintendo Direct, we instead received a partner showcase. Now don't get me wrong, it was great to be able to see games from other Nintendo partners, but it was weird not having Nintendo announce any of their own stuff. And of course, most people were completely okay with it because a lot of us were running under the assumption that in March of 2024, Nintendo was going to announce their successor console to the Nintendo Switch. And you know, hindsight is 2020, and clearly that did not happen. Then in June, we finally got our first Nintendo General Direct, focusing on the games coming to the Nintendo Switch in the second half of 2024. But even though Nintendo had an amazing showcase in June and a lot of people are excited and hyped for the games, I think it does suggest though what to expect or rather not expect from Nintendo in the few months to come. Now, typically we get 3 Nintendo Directs a year. One for the beginning of the year, one in the middle of the year, and one near the end. But here's the thing, the early and mid-year directs are typically unreliable. Sometimes the early direct is in March, and sometimes the mid-year direct just plain out doesn't happen. Undoubtedly, the most reliable Nintendo Direct is always the September time direct. Every year ever since Nintendo released the Switch, Nintendo has had a Nintendo Direct in September. Every single year, at the exception of one, 2020, for reasons I need not elaborate. However, I think that 2024 will be another exceptional year for Nintendo without a Nintendo Direct in September. Let me explain. I often listen to the Kit and Krista podcast, which is hosted by 2 ex-Nintendo employees. And although it's been a while since they've been working there, I still think some of the things they say still hold a lot of value. For example, they mentioned how Nintendo decides when to do their Nintendo Directs. And it's not in the way that we think about it, how they're going to have 3 Directs, one in February, one in June, one in September. They only make a Direct when they have a purpose for one. And that being said, in September, we just plain out don't need one. Let's use June as our start date because that's when we had our last Direct. In June, we got Luigi's Mansion 2 release, then in July we had Nintendo World Championship NES Edition. And in terms of games we can look forward to, I'm purposely going to skip August for now and move on to September. So in September we're going to have The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, then in October we are going to have a Super Mario Party Jamboree, November we will see Mario and Luigi Brothership release, and then we'll have nothing in December. Mind you, not having a game release in December is completely normal. Moving on, we also know that in January we're going to have Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, meaning the only 2 months left from this fiscal year for Nintendo that we don't know about games from them is February and March. But now let me go back to August. In this Nintendo Direct, they did not mention any games coming out in August. However, that recently changed. Because via a Twitter drop, Nintendo announces Emio the Smiling Man Famicom Detective Club, a brand new entry in the Famicom Detective Club, and it's releasing in August. So even if Nintendo had another game or two to release between here and the end of the fiscal year, they can just do it via a Twitter drop. They don't necessarily need a Nintendo Direct. Now, they might do a partner direct or something like that, or an indie showcase, something along those lines, just to simply have a presentation in September. But there's one last thing we just can't forget about. But before we dive into that, I just have one quick little thing to say. If this is your first time here, hey, my name's Acadrien and I post weekly Nintendo videos. So if you're enjoying what you're seeing now, I would greatly appreciate it if you would just consider liking and subscribing, and without further ado, let's go right back into the video. So as I was mentioning, Nintendo absolutely just doesn't need a full-on general Nintendo Direct in the month of September. For 2 reasons really, above all the others we have already talked about. First off, and probably the most boring of the 2 answers, is that, we already have games to lead us all the way up until February, and like we mentioned before, in February we can typically expect a Nintendo Direct. And in that February Direct, the goal of the Direct, so the purpose of it, will be to inform people about all the games you can expect from Nintendo for the first half of the year. And of course, one of the biggest reasons why we don't need a Nintendo Direct in September is because, as we already know, Nintendo announced that they will be announcing the successor to the Nintendo Switch before the fiscal year ends. And although I did see online some people speculate that we could see this console as early as August, I don't quite believe that. But I do believe that in the September-October timeframe, we could get our first glance at this new console. And if that is the case, first off, Nintendo never announced any console ever in a Nintendo Direct, only console variations but not announced the console itself. And let's say theoretically that this console is going to be releasing in the month of March. What could happen is during the presentation that's hypothetically happening in September, October-ish, we can see the console itself and see glimpses of games, but then in the February Direct, the purpose of it can be announcing a couple more Switch games for existing Switch owners, but also announce games coming to Switch 2, including launch games for March. But then in February, the purpose of that February Direct could be one, to announce a couple more Switch games for the existing Switch owners that just won't be able to go out and buy the Switch 2 day one. Because, you can't just leave them in the dust, and Nintendo did kind of imply in the past that they didn't intend to do that anyways, just drop the Switch. But then the secondary goal of this Direct can be to announce games for the predecessor to the Switch. Of course, games that we can expect in the future, but most importantly, launch games. But now I want to turn the discussion back to you. What do you think about all of this? Do you think Nintendo is going to have a Direct in September? Let me know down in the comments. But yeah, until next time, Wadao.